5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hello and welcome back to Tennis Unfiltered with me, James Gray of inews.co.uk and the iNewspaper. I've got George Bellshaw with me and Calvin Betton. We're going to go through everything that's been going on in the last week in tennis, both on and off the court. I suspect we might spend a little bit more time talking about off the court than on it, but that's just the way things are sometimes, and that's where all the good juice is anyway. We'll talk about Boris Becker, Emma Raducanu, Saudi Arabia, Ben Shelton, Alexander Bublik, Arthur Feast maybe, and the best doubles pair in Europe, I think it's fair to say now, Stefanos and Petros Tsitsipas, but we'll maybe not spend too much time on that. And there's lots more to talk about as well. I've no doubt, I usually say this at the end and say we haven't got through everything. I'm going to say at the beginning, we're definitely not going to get through everything today, and I apologise in advance, but we are of limited time. But we'll do our very best. As always, if you leave us a 5-star review, I insist that I will always read it out. 2 of you have in the last couple of days, so I'm very grateful for that. Janeo, it's come from Spain, so I don't know if I pronounced that right, so I apologise. Janeo says, serious and fun. So happy I found this podcast. I'm a big fan of tennis, and I learn a lot listening to the podcast team. They present the show both funny and seriously. British humour adds points here. And Ciao for Now says, fun and enjoyable. Love the latest episode. Interesting about the gear. I assume he means trainers, not...
Yeah, we didn't talk about doping last week, did we?
I mean, Calvin did admit to being a coke addict, but that, I think, might have been something quite different. I'm not quite sure.
Well, we spoke about the doping of the Guinness. So,
yes, and I did enjoy... I think we potentially had a comment on YouTube about that, who enjoying the Guinness stories. And yes, any other stories of casual sporting doping, I would be very much interested in hearing about. Give us your it's your first time in Stockholm. I think give us your assessment of the event. The tennis aside, how did you find the whole experience?
Yeah, it's funny, you forget in some of these big indoor events how the thing what always stands out to me, the first one I always go to each year after having done basically all the summer, is that you enter in the morning, because you generally practice in the morning, so you enter and then you don't leave, especially as a doubles coach, doubles players, you don't leave till later. So in that place, especially because there were no windows, it was you basically didn't see any daylight, or you were just inside for 10 hours.
Yeah,
I suppose you practice twice, or get lunch there, maybe get dinner there, and that's something that always shocks me the first time I go to one of the bigger indoor tournaments. And this one was particularly unique because it was a huge building that had, in terms of, they had loads more practice courts when the tournament's not on. It's actually a tennis centre. It's the National Tennis Centre in Stockholm. But they had 6 courts, maybe, or 5 courts, 2 match courts and 3 practice, yeah. And then a couple of bars and corporate areas and that kind of thing.
It was a good event. Court ratio.
Yeah, it was a good event. Yeah. Again, you got a feeling there was a lot of tennis fans there. It was a small centre court, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been to bigger centre courts at challenges in France, where they'll put tournaments on in arenas. Now they don't get as many crowd. They don't get. Well, some of them do actually. Some of them fill those stadiums, but yeah, it was a good event. Yeah, I know a lot of players weren't happy about the speed of the courts and the speed of the balls,
which we discussed last week. In that context, I'm pretty surprised to see Gael Monfils winning the title, albeit not in a stellar singles field after Holger Rune was beaten by Majomir Kekmanovic in the first round, but. Any surprise to see Monfils winning in those conditions, Calvin?
It's just he's got pedigree, hasn't he? You forget about Monfils because he's a bit of a joker and everyone loves him. He's a hell of a tennis player. Like he's been legitimate top 10 in the world for about 10 years. So it's he's a hell of a player. But I mean, one of the things that you always hear, and I'm not sort of promoting this, but you always hear like the people who practice hard are the guys who win and that kind of thing. And, we always see these clips of Nadal, like the way he practices. Like, I always forget. I've seen Monfils practice a few times, but you just forget just how slack it is. His practices. I mean, it is. Federer was probably the most relaxed I've seen him. Federer was notoriously a terrible practicer.
Yeah.
Like sometimes he won't run in practice. He barely put the ball in court a lot of the time. But Monfils is right up there as well in terms of just terrible practices. But it's what he does.
I found it interesting. I love going and watching players practice because I think you learn so much about their kind of just general demeanour, but also about them as people. And I remember going to watch Francis Tiafoe practice in Australia, and he basically got Jessica Pegula in to make him take it seriously. He was like, "Yeah, she's pretty uptight in training, so it kind of helps because otherwise I just take the piss." And like he really does, just like stands on the baseline, like chatting with his coach and just like hitting the odd massive serve. But
I know Tiafoe, like when we were in Dallas earlier this year, we were on the next court to him practicing, and he was doing his singles practice. We were practicing doubles, but we had 3 players practicing. We had Julian Henry, who I was there with, and I think we had another guy who was just, whoever it was playing with maybe JP Smith, I think, who was playing with a singles player or someone else anyway. And like mid-point, Tiafoe just ran in and joined the doubles point on the next court, and stayed for about 4 points and then left again. So yeah, not sure how much focus there was on his own singles.
How far did he go?
How far did he go? I think he lost to JJ Wolf. I think I watched it. Yeah.
Speaking of training and coaches, I don't know. I was going to try and segue this, but I can't. Next topic: Boris Becker and Holger Rune, which is not the partnership we thought we were going to get. It was announced a few hours after, Calvin, you had been on this podcast saying Holger Rune was in Stockholm without a coach and he really needs one. So I've no doubt that the appointment of Boris Becker is going to get your full support.
I mean, I don't see this working out. I've got to be honest. I really don't. Somebody was asking me last week, but he's got quite a good pedigree as a coach, hasn't he? And it's the classic one, he's worked with Djokovic. And I was like, yeah, he took over the best player of all time serial Grand Slam winning world number 1. And for 2 years, he carried on being the best player of all time world number 1 serial Grand Slam winner. And when Becker left, he carried on being the best player of all time serial Grand Slam winner. So it's difficult because that's not a criticism of Becker, but it's hard to tell whether he had any impact at all on Djokovic. Like I can make a pretty solid argument that he had 0 impact on Djokovic at all.
Yeah, I mean, Djokovic at the time, if you look at how it was reported at the time, I'm pretty sure Becker, when he left, had won as many Grand Slams with Djokovic had when he started. It's something like 6-6 or 5-6 or something like that. So at the time, it was kind of reported as, Djokovic had lost his way a little bit. 2011 had been and gone and hadn't really quite found that brilliant form again. And Becker took him into a period of kind of dominance. But then that narrative has changed quite dramatically since Djokovic has then gone on to double the total of Becker plus the previous bit since and has now gone on to 24. So it's funny how time kind of changes things. His coaching pedigree aside, obviously one slight issue, and to be fair to Becker, he's kind of saying they've not signed a long contract because you never know, these things can end after a week sort of thing. But he's not allowed in the UK at the minute, is he? So he won't be coming to Wimbledon.
Yeah.
My dad actually mentioned this to me earlier on. I was talking to my dad about it because I loved Becker, but also finds it hilarious that he got done for fine art. My dad loves to see the downfall of anybody, so particularly enjoyed that. Even somebody we particularly thought was brilliant.
From Yorkshire.
And I say, there's got to be a way around that, hasn't there? It's like, what's the worst that can happen? The sentence they dished out initially was ridiculous, wasn't it? But and it's like, say he wants to come back into. He's only really. What's he going to do? He's going to play 2 tournaments, isn't he? He's going to play Queens and Wimbledon. There's nothing else really here.
And I was speaking to someone, and I understand that he's still got all the trappings of Mouratoglou around him. Like, he's still got the same physical trainer, he's still got the same analyst,
Mum.
he's still got the same mum/agent. It's just a different head coach. So, it's not a huge sea change, and the fact that Boris won't be able to come for a couple of weeks in the middle of next summer if he lasts that long is not that big.
I mean, I don't know the legalities of it, but I'd find it bizarre if they appealed it on the premise that it's his job that he coaches this particular tennis player, who's, by the way, is not a random tennis player. He's one of the top 10 tennis players in the world. I can't see how they'd argue, no, we're not going to let him in case he commits some sort of fraud again, in the 2 weeks while he's here.
So I think it's because, I mean, I'm no expert on this, but it's under the terms of his license. So, yeah, you probably can apply for special dispensation, but I think they'll probably look on it. Like, I think the whole, as you say, Calvin, I think we're all surprised by the sentence and the severity of it. And I do think that the courts are trying to send a bit of a message about this stuff, that, like, no one is above the law. I think Boris was a bit unlucky. If he hadn't been Boris Becker, I don't think he'd have gone to prison. But because he was Boris Becker, I think he got the sort of, extra crack of the whip. And I think that, given that, I think the courts would be very reticent to then go, oh, well, you're coming to Wimbledon, so of course, not a problem. We'll make it work. Well, of course.
I think going back to the actual coaching side of it, that I feel like I'm sometimes overly critical of Becker because I loved him as well as a player. He's probably the first player I can remember that broke through while I was into tennis. When I was very young. And I've said it on the podcast before that when Becker's introduction into the game, when you think about it now, in terms of physicality, was size. Like, we've never seen anything like it before. And then the best way I can possibly describe it now, compared to what it was then when he arrived, is if suddenly in the next year there was a 17-year-old who was built like and the same size as Anthony Joshua came and was good at tennis. That's what you'd be looking at, and that's the difference in what he did. So, but I feel like I'm always critical of him. But what I will say about him is that when I hear him talk, when he commentates, I just don't find him compelling about the game at all. There's certain ex-players, like Courier, I think is quite good. I find Petch quite good sometimes, but I think Petch is a good coach as well. There's certain people who you find, Brad Gilbert, when he talks, I've been to a couple of seminars with Brad Gilbert, and he's just he's compelling about the game. Becker, for somebody who was so good, you look at why he was good, though. He was just massive and so powerful and so athletic. It's not like anyone thought, like, this is a tactical genius here. What he's bringing, he was just bigger than everybody else and better than everybody else, and that's not a criticism of him. He was brilliant, but Boris was brilliant. But I just don't see what he's going to bring. Now, what he might bring, I think, is, and I'm trying to think of the positives here. What he might bring is, I think he's a serious person. He's a multiple Grand Slam winner, and he's a hard man. Was Boris Becker in his prime. And I think if Holger Rune needs a kick up the arse and needs somebody to lay the law down to him, then that might work. But on the flip side of that, I don't think Holger Rune wants that. I think that if that happened, from what I know about Holger Rune, and I don't know loads about it, but from what people tell me, if that happened, he'd just sack him. So I just don't see it working.
Yeah, I mean, on a similar theme, I was going to say the other thing that the phase of the super coach that people have tried to argue is having that person you really respect, who you grew up watching and love. But Becker just feels too far away from Rune to have watched him. Is that right? I mean, I don't really remember Boris Becker playing.
I think the things that Becker would, in theory, from that generation, George, they still stand. And I don't think he's too old. Is that what you were meaning, from a different generation?
No, I just mean, like, in terms of, like, you think about Murray talking about Lendl, for example, and Djokovic will have had this more with Becker, potentially being able to say, oh yeah, but I remember growing up seeing some of Becker in action, whereas Rune is almost it feels like too many generations have passed for Rune to
realistically... will have retired before Rune was born. Pretty sure that's the case, yeah.
So I was just saying, like, that's the other kind of angle people have taken with the Supercoach, but that feels just too far a gap, really. So you can't imagine there's much of that.
I don't know if Murray would have, like, Lendl was, like Murray was born in 87. Lendl was done by 90, pretty much, in terms of actual force in it. So I don't think that's necessarily important. But I'm intrigued to know whether Holger Rune doesn't strike me as the type of person who's open to whatever it takes. I know, okay, I'm not going to name the coach or the player, but I know a player who's told the coach, this was a few years ago now, and he's not a British player, he was a foreign player. There's no reason why I can't name the player, actually. It was Korpatsch, who told his coach, right when it was Ryan Jones who was the coach, he's a friend of mine. Ryan told me that Korpatsch and his dad told him, whatever you need to do to get him where he needs to be, everything is on the table. Like, and I don't mean like, there's no, I don't mean any doping or anything like that. But no, that's not what I mean.
Wire me up.
No, but he said there's no, however much you need to bollock him, however much home truths you need to tell him, if he's not working, you need to do that, and he'll do it. And Ryan said that Korpatsch was phenomenal in that respect. That there was no arguments. He did whatever. It was like whatever he said went. Holger Rune does not strike me as that type of person.
Yeah, just on Korpatsch, I think it's Chorich. He was at Boodles this year, and like as you know, Calvin, Boodles is a bit of a hit and giggle, and I was surprised to see Korpatsch there because it didn't feel like his kind of event, but he went on court for his match having done a full hour and a half before he went on court, like flat out. He was dripping in sweat walking onto court for his exhibition match. He took it incredibly seriously and did a half-hour hit afterwards. And I then interviewed him, and he sat like right next to me on this bench, and I was like, I could taste the sweat on him. I've never seen a man like sweat so much.
I mean, some people are just like that. I know that, like, one of the doubles players, Jan Zielinski, who's top 10 in the world, I think he made final of Aussie Open, and he's a Polish guy, and he's notoriously very, very intense. And Luke was telling me that he played with him in Poland a few years ago, and they played against a player and his coach in the first round, who they just entered, and Luke and Jan were winning like 6-2, 5-1, 30 love. And the player who was playing with his coach chucked a lob up, and Jan's gone easy put away smash. And he's absolutely rifled it at the coach's head. And the coach has gone like, what are you doing? And he's going, and Jan's gone, why wouldn't I do that? And he's gone like, and the coach has gone, but you're winning easy. Like, you're winning this match in about 2 minutes. And he said that Jan Luke said Jan couldn't comprehend why you wouldn't do the same as you would do at 8-all in the tiebreak. Like, it's like, we're in a match here. Why wouldn't I hit you in the head? I would do that at 8-all. And then he said it was one of those bizarre arguments where they were both right. And the coach was like, there's no need to do it, though. He was like, you're going to win. We're not even trying. And he said that Jan couldn't. And some people are just like that.
Yeah.
And again, but coming back to Holger Rune, I don't know. And this is not like, I'm not saying he's not professional or anything. I don't know him well enough. Maybe I'm wrong. But I don't see Boris Becker say he wants to lay some home truths down. I don't see that going down well in the Rune camp. Not only with him, but with his mum, who's very influential as well.
But then, George, do you see Becker as that kind of... Because, as I say, that there are other people around Rune who are going to be still involved. Do you see Becker as that kind of home truth guy, or is he maybe a bit more of a... But Briggsy always talks about Mouratoglou as a great Svengali. Do you see Becker as that kind of figure, maybe?
I mean, I've met Boris a few times, and I can't say I've ever really considered what that would then translate into his kind of coaching prowess. I mean, I'm trying to rack through my memory to think what Djokovic kind of said he added. But I think again, for Djokovic, it's the same with Murray. Regardless of how much they actually watched him or not, there was a degree of respect and just wanting someone who's been there in the big moments. I think, Holger Rune does believe he's going to be in the big moments. So, from that perspective, he might see that. Where it's probably slightly different, or very different, is that Murray and Djokovic were both already in Grand Slam finals regularly at the top of the world. Rune's got himself up to 6 or whatever, but he's not really come that close to winning a slam. And he's been in the worst form of his life for whatever the last 3 or 4 months. It doesn't feel quite the same fine tuning that a Murray or Djokovic perhaps needed, just a slight mental lift in big moments versus a guy who's, it's really not going well at the minute. He needs a lot of work to get back up there. But I guess from his perspective, Rune, earlier in the year, we were talking about him being probably the closest challenger to Alcaraz in this generation. So there's definitely a player in there and someone who believes he can go far. It's just a lot has gone wrong, and I'm not convinced Boris Becker's the man I would be bringing in at this stage, even if you wanted that mental lift.
He's had a bizarre
down the
year.
line.
He's had a bizarre year, hasn't he? Because it's around about this time last year that he went up a level. Well, he went up 2 levels, really. He won Stockholm and then he won Paris. And he beat Djokovic in the final, didn't he? And
now he's been handed, having lost first round to Miomir Kekmanovic in Stockholm, he is playing Miomir Kekmanovic again at Swiss indoors. When it rains, it pours.
I tell you, there's not many players, I reckon, who've got like a terrible record against all the Serbians except for one of them. And the one who he hasn't got a terrible record against is Novak Djokovic.
Yeah, exactly. Very
but
odd.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's a good move. But again, it feels like one of the tennis players. I just don't know what. We're going to talk a lot about coaching, I guess, for the rest of this show because we got Raducanu as well. But I just don't know what they think of when they employ their coaches and what they want. And I don't get how you've landed at Boris Becker. If you're I do know. I suspect it's very much come from, and I think this is why it's happened. I think this will feed Rune's ego, which he does have. I assume it's come that Becker's made the move, that he's had his people contact Rune and say, why don't we do this? I think, and that does happen a lot. And I think, that's probably what's happened is that Rune's like the ego's getting massaged and thinks, Becker wants, and that's what happened with Lendl. To be fair, Lendl approached Murray, wasn't the other way around.
I mean, I highly doubt Holger Rune's camp is this well thought out, but there is a PR benefit to this. This has been a big kind of story in the English media that really, how many big stories has Holger Rune probably had? People know who Boris Becker is. If you're a guy who's 19, 20, trying to make yourself appeal to a wider audience, actually, it's probably not the worst PR move in the world, even if you think it's just going to be for 6 weeks or a month. Have him for the Australian Open, get yourself fit over the winter, doesn't really matter. Bid him off, and then people still know you work for Boris Becker and will remember you going forward. I mean, I highly doubt that's why they've done it, but
what do we reckon the date is? How long does it last?
Well, Becker wasn't even willing to commit to a week. So.
Right. It could be like one of those. Remember when Agassi was Djokovic's coach? And that lasted about 3 weeks, didn't it?
I reckon if I had to put my money on it, I'd say February.
That long? Wow.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how long Agassi Djokovic lasted for, because I think it actually started in the winter and then he played till about the clay and then ditched Agassi. So he probably did get 4 or 5 months out of him. So I'd probably stick something similar here. I'd be surprised if he was still kicking around by the French Open, which would be a tournament Rune, and he'll probably realise by then he's got less of a chance with Boris in his ear than he did without him.
We shall see. Let us know on Twitter at Unfiltered Tennis. We'd love to hear how long you think Boris Becker will last in Holger Rune's team. If it was,
I'll say this: it's quite. It could work in Becker's favour, to be fair, because what he's done is he's got, and I give Rune some stick on this, but I do think he's an excellent tennis player when his mind's on it, and I'm certain he'll get back to that level. But what he's got is he's got probably, over the last year, probably been one of the 5 best tennis players in the world in terrible form, and you'd think that he's got to turn that form round anyway, even if nothing happens. He's not going to just keep losing like he is now.
Yeah.
So Becker comes out of it looking absolute top class if it works out for him.
Yeah. Very
It's
much.
not like
It's
it's not like you've taken somebody who's like 40 in the world and struggling to make a breakthrough. You just don't know if they've got the quality. You've just got a very, very good tennis player here who's like a little bit out of form. Well, quite a bit out of form.
Speaking of very, very good tennis players who are quite a bit out of form and interchanging coaches, call me a segue artist, why don't you? Emma Raducanu has been speaking this week. She did an interview with Kathy at the BBC, who's a friend of the show and a friend of mine, and always does a good job in her various presenting roles. And she bagged a big interview with Emma Raducanu, which you might have heard on the Today programme. You might have read it in my newsletter. You will have seen it everywhere, but you've not heard Calvin Betton off the long run yet, which I know is what you've all been waiting for. He's broadly supportive, I'm sure. Look, you've also sent in lots of questions along those lines. Andy on email says, what are your thoughts on the Emma Raducanu comments? As a coach in another sport who reached the top of the coaching qualifications, I found the comments more than a little insulting to those in question. As a coach, surely you want to be challenged by your players. It makes you a better coach, having to technically and tactically come up with the answers and build that trust in each other. Coaching is hard work. Coaches don't switch off and are always looking to improve their own skills and knowledge, and I have more sleepless nights than players. I'd be interested in the thoughts from the three of you. All the best as usual. Thanks for the question, Andy. Calvin, I think by now everyone kind of knows what she said, and the line that made headlines was that I ask my coaches lots of questions and sometimes they can't keep up, and that has perhaps been why it's not worked out with a few of them. Calvin, just tell me what your initial reaction to those comments was, and maybe if they've changed at all over the week.
Well, they're not new comments for starters, because they put her. I don't know if she's explicitly said it herself before, Emma, but people have put this out regularly.
It's certainly been reported before, I think by the BBC actually.
Yeah, like it's something that's quite unique, which I don't think it is. Now, what I'll say, first of all, I'll say that a good coach, anyway, will always. It's one of the things that you learn on coaching, basic coaching theory, that you explain why you want to do something first. So if it's on that, then that's no problem. If she's asking, it depends what these questions are that she's asking. If it's a case of let's do this drill, and she's going, all right, well, and it's termed right. What's this going to help me with? But then the coach, you think, would explain that anyway. So I don't, but again, I don't know if she's had good coaches. Some of them have not been, but. The flip side of that is, and I've seen it referred to this week as that it's fine, and it's very strange with Emma. Well, with tennis players in general, that basically everybody these people have these fanatical tennis fans, and Emma Raducanu certainly does. They've already decided what their position on it is anyway, regardless of what she says, and the defenders of it are going, it's fantastic because she's got a curiosity of learning. Whereas I thought the wording of what she said, and I've listened to the interview and I've read the quotes, is it doesn't sound like she's got a curiosity of learning. It just sounds like she's trying to prove people wrong. And the position that she's come from with the wording of that is that all tennis coaches are shit. I'm basically going to employ them, and then I'm going to prove how intelligent I am, and now they don't know anything about anywhere near as much about tennis as I do. And we've heard this again, not from her. We've heard it from. I don't know whether it was one of her agents or somebody has said that she doesn't think that we went through this period of just hearing about her tennis IQ. Her tennis IQ is so huge that nobody can understand it, which is also absolute bullshit. She doesn't have a bigger tennis IQ than every other tennis player in the top 100. I know that much. She doesn't have a bigger tennis IQ than Iga Swiatek, does she? Let's have it straight. Or does she have a bigger tennis IQ than anybody? If it's that good, then she'd be winning a lot more than the 2 weeks that she's won. But I know plenty of coaches who I'm absolutely certain would have the tennis IQ of Emma Raducanu. But if you come to a position, which is what my concern is, that she just thinks my tennis IQ is better than anybody else's, and I'm just going to I'm just going to keep asking them to try and prove them wrong. I don't see how you ever get if you're making that your brand, I suppose. I don't see how you're ever going to have any lasting coaching relationship if you're going. I would be more comfortable with it if she didn't know she did it herself, and people went, she just asks a lot of questions, and she wants to know a lot. But when she's now explicitly come out and said it herself, that to me is worrying, because I think that you've now got this thing where you're just going to try and also I know this because I know from people who are close to the camp. Her dad, who she's close with, I don't know. I know she'd fallen. I think somebody told me they've fallen out, but I think they're probably friends again now. Her dad thinks that all tennis coaches are shit. He's explicitly said it. So it wouldn't surprise me if Emma thinks that. And in which case, what's the point in having them? What's the point? Are you just now when you're saying and the wording of it, they couldn't keep up. What couldn't keep up with questions? Like who are you employing? Like what? I'd be very comfortable talking to Emma Raducanu about anything to do with tennis. Like, who are these people who can't keep up? Like, are they level 1 coaching assistants that you're employing?
I think that you're kind of touching on a point between there's challenging received wisdom in certain practices that might not be useful, where it's good to collaboratively challenge and say, look, why are we doing this like this? This hasn't been working for us. Why are we doing this? Can we get to the root of that? Can we work together to kind of solve it? But that's not the same as the person you're working with being like, I don't think they get it. I think they're wrong all the time. That just strikes me as someone who's like, as you say, Calvin, she's not found the solutions herself. She's gone on very poor match-winning streaks. Someone who was really figuring out, trying to make everything perfect and right. You'd expect better results or more signs of trying to change things to see match. I mean, how many matches have you watched of Emma Raducanu where you thought, oh, she's done something really different here today? I didn't see that one coming. I've never felt there's that much big changes. And that's no great criticism. A lot of tennis players don't change it that much. They know what they're doing. It's marginal gains of what they're already doing that they think will get them over the line. But I've never seen anything from her game that I thought, God, that's really revolutionary or different. And it wouldn't necessarily translate through like that. But as Calvin says, it's the framing of the coaches can't keep up with me, but not the progression on the court to support that. I think if she was flying off, ditching coaches, as you've seen other players do, we've had like Evo ditch coaches before, haven't we? And kind of say, I think I've been doing this long enough now. I'm not sure what a voice in my camp would do for me at the minute. And you can say if he's right or wrong about that, but he's been there, done it. He had some decent results in that period, and then he picked up a coach and things did go well. But it's not original from that perspective either.
I would say this about Evo in that respect, and I think it's a decent example, George, there. And I say this because Evo's a friend of mine. I've had numerous conversations with him about it, even just last week. Evo will tell you, he will list 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 loads of good coaches who he knows. Some who he's worked with and it hasn't worked out, and some who other players have, and he'll go, he's a very good coach, and that kind of thing. So he knows what a good coach is. He's more talking about what they can bring to him, and there are coaches, I think, as well, who he'd love to. I mean, I know that his former coach, he thought was a very good coach, but it was the weeks travelling that was the concern. He never thought he wasn't a good coach. It was just the number of weeks he could commit to. Whereas, who does Emma Raducanu think's a good coach?
Yeah, I mean, and
if you don't think anybody's a good coach, how do you know what a good coach is?
Well, they said. I mean, I spoke to people in and around Emma Raducanu, who said that they were keen on Sebastian Sachs because he was very detail orientated, because he's a very good mimic, like as a hitter apparently, which they found was useful. I know, like he can hit the ball like a woman, basically.
What questions did she ask him then?
Well, exactly. Yeah, precisely. I mean, I think to be fair, he also was a badly timed coach because he basically turned up. She immediately got injured and was pretty much injured on and off for the next 6 months. But
it'd be interesting to know as well because I assume Raducanu and camp think that you there's some sort of linear value given he's from a financial world between quality and price and why you can get things better. But it feels a bit odd to me that on the one hand, they've got this position where they don't want to pay a premium for a top coach despite having plenty of money in the bank. And I'm not saying all top coaches who command the biggest fees are the best coaches, by the way. But if you're that sure that the fodder you're getting for the price you're paying at the minute isn't going that well, then they're not fodder either. Some of them have been okay coaches. Some of them, you can take or leave. But they're not willing to put the money in the pocket for the top guy. Go and get Wim Fissette. Everyone knows that guy's an absolutely brilliant guy. I know he's just gone to Osaka. He was kicking around. She could have gone and got him if she wanted him.
But
Seriously.
do you think, George, if she'd have got him, do you think she'd have just taken that? I don't know. I'm speaking out of turn here, and again, I'm always cautious of this because I always feel like, and everyone thinks I'm always being critical of Emma Raducanu, and I think she's a phenomenal tennis talent. I always have. And the time that I've spent around Emma Raducanu, she's been a lovely girl, very nice. I think her agent apparently is a really nice guy. I don't know him, but so it's not me being overly critical of it. It's me coming from a coach's point of view that I would have preferred it. I'll go to Wim Fissette first. If you're just going to get Wim Fissette in and you're going to go, I'm going to prove him wrong. I'm going to show that I know more about tennis than him. And that's just not a great place to start, is it? It's not a great place. But the disappointing thing for me with this interview, and from a tennis fan's point of view and somebody who I think I know a bit about tennis and sport in general, this interview I would have liked her to have come across and the tone being more, look, I need to get out there and win some tennis matches and start and take away all the chaff and all the static that's around me, whether that be with a coach that I know or a coach that I don't. But I had a very good 2021.
No.
I had a very good 2021, and it's not gone well since then. I need to sort my shit out, and I need to start winning some tennis matches before I'm laying the blame on anyone else. I was pretty disappointed that at this stage we get an interview where it's just her going, "Yeah, I'm fantastic at everything," and they can't keep up with me and this is why the coaches haven't worked out.
Yeah, it's sometimes I've been covering Emma Raducanu for so long now and kind of too in it that sometimes you don't have perspective. So my perspective giver in my life is my fiance, and I asked her because she listens to the Today program for 2 hours every morning. I said, "Well, did you hear the Raducanu interview?" She's like, "Yes." I was like, "Well, have you listened to the extended version?" I sent it to her, and she said, "Yes." And I said, "What do you think?" And she said, "Well, she comes off as a bit arrogant," and that was it. Like, I didn't want to say it because it was what I was thinking, and maybe we're in a groupthink situation. That's what happens when you start thinking about getting married to someone. But it did come across as arrogant, and I don't know whether that was just an accident or whether it's the truth or what. And sometimes self-confidence and arrogance look very similar, but it's hard to listen to.
I think she's been injured, right? And I will say this, James. I again, from my limited time around her, I don't think she's arrogant. That's not. But I've not spent any time around her since she won US Open. So, I'm trying to think of the words to say it here. Was if nothing, what's changed here? Because pre-injury, right? The results weren't great, and we were swapping coaches a lot. And that kind of thing. So what's changed? What would have, again, I'll say the same thing again. What if she'd have come out and said what I've just said? Look, I need to get down to business. I need to get I'm going to get coaching. I'm going to listen. I'm going to find a coach who I trust. And I'm going to ask him some, I'll ask him some questions. I like things explaining to me. Like you could say that. I like to be engaged in the session. I like to be engaged in my own development. And, so I do like to, ask some questions, but I need to get down to winning some tennis matches. I need to get a coach. I need to put some trust in them. I'm going to explain it, but this is on me. I need to win some tennis matches here. Instead, we haven't really heard anything from Emma Raducanu for a few months, 6-7 months, and she's come out and basically said the exact same lines that her and her team have been saying, and it seemed to me like it was a little bit scripted.
Yeah, it could have been a plan. I mean, I don't know. She must have known that question was coming, and people, you do prepare for these interviews. I don't know.
Why wouldn't you say if she knew that question was coming, James? Why wouldn't she could have addressed this thing, because I've heard, we've all heard this stuff before. People have said it all the time, that she questions the coach. She asks a lot of questions, which isn't in itself a bad thing. Why not explain it as to why you do that?
Yeah.
And go, I do ask a lot. Like I've just said there, I do like a lot of questions. I like to, and I've said this before, right? That coaching at that level, and what I do in doubles, which is at that level, coach 2 players now, we're both ranked above Emma Raducanu in doubles, so it's, it's the same. The principles are the same. Coaching is basically conversations. It's not me going, Henry just lost a match now before we went on air. I've had half an hour of text conversation with him. It's not me going, you did this, this, and this, and this. It's like, what do you think to that? How do you think you can get that better? What do you think what do you think we can get better at? And that kind of thing. It is conversations. Why don't I just say that? Why don't you just address it? Go, people say I'm always pestering for questions. What I'm saying is I just like to know what we're doing. I'd like to know how this is going to get me from A to B. Not that what she said sounded like she was just trying to catch people out.
Yeah.
It is quite funny you say that, Cal, because I know we shouldn't draw the comparisons between football and tennis too much, but as a Villa fan, I've become obviously
I wondered how long it would take you to bring up Villa at the moment.
very enriched in kind of Unai Emery and what he's all about. And, they're saying he spends all week analysing all this footage. He puts like 4 coaches around one individual player, sort of micromanaging every sort of aspect of what they're doing and trying to control this whole team thing. I mean, there are coaches out there that it is different in a kind of team sport where you're positioning players and passages of play, but there are. Does that sort of thing exist in tennis? Or is there someone just sitting there watching everything, thinking this is exactly what you need to do in this moment, and kind of trying to choreograph it that way?
I've seen it, but it's more open. I mean, doubles is quite like that. You can micromanage quite a bit in doubles because it's more predictable. Singles, there's so many things that can happen. I don't think you can do that. You can't go if the ball goes here, then this will happen, then this will happen from that, and then this will have to happen from that. That's just not how it works from opponent to opponent. But I have seen coaches who are very, very big micromanagers. But again, there's different types of coaches. And what I saw somebody make a fair point the other day, right? These questions, right? Do them in the interview. Don't employ somebody and then get, and go, right, what's your coaching philosophy, right? And why do you think that that's the best way to do it? Can you explain that to me, right? Don't get on the court and then go, right, I'm going to show my coach up today. I don't get it. I don't get what you think you're getting from that, and I don't get what you think you're getting from talking about it.
There's only one way to solve this, Calvin. It's get you on court with Emma Raducanu.
I wouldn't go near the job. I wouldn't. Because why? I wouldn't, because it's not good for your reputation. It's and I like to think as well that I don't have as much money as I'd like, but I like to think, it depends what the check would be. But
not ruling himself out.
But no, right? I'd like to think that I've got some sort of self-respect, and I'm not going to go work with somebody who's going to go, I'm just going to show this person up.
Yeah,
I'm going to try and embarrass this person in the sessions that we're going to do together. There's other players I wouldn't go near. Players who I think are good players, but what I know is that the players I work with now, we have a mutual respect, and we, and if it doesn't get that way, then we'll stop working together. But I know that it's, they ask me questions all the time, but and I'll say, look, and we've both been in situations like, I've been in situations in the last year where I've set something up, a drill, and I've thought, this is fucking rubbish, this is not working, and I'm just going, right, let's end it there. Right, and then they've gone, yeah, that was crap. And I don't take offence to it.
No.
They've said it first. I remember I had a mini argument with Henry in Delray this year when we were doing a drill, and he was like, no one's engaged in this. And I lost my head a bit on it, but in the end he was right. No one was engaged in it.
Yeah.
But it's not like every single drill that we do, they're going to try and prove that this drill's shit. And
I'm really tempted to cut in a voice note from Henry now to get the other side of the story, the big Delray bust up.
I maintain if you do that, and you get Henry to do that before I get a chance to reply, I remain that he did 3 double faults in a row, and that's why the drill was crap.
So you weren't you weren't feeding out of dropping the ball out of a basket.
No,
were you,
we
Calvin?
weren't.
That's your
We
favourite
weren't, no.
drill, I've heard.
No. I'll tell you what we're doing because people might find it interesting. We're just playing points, but in doubles you obviously have to stay or you cross. Okay, like when you're serving, the service partner, the server and the service partner stay or they cross. Now, what I thought, because we'd just been on indoor hard, we weren't playing enough first volleys, so I wanted them to play more first volleys. So I said, right, you've got to tell the returner what you're doing, so they know how to avoid the net player. So you're going to save. So then, if they know you're going to cross, they're going to return line, etc. And in theory, stuff happens like that. In theory, I thought it worked. It didn't work. It wasn't realistic enough. And Henry spotted it before. I kind of knew as well, but I didn't want to admit it. My ego was a bit too big. But it was like, and he said, it's just not engaging anybody. But like I say, he did serve 3 double faults. So that but no, but that kind of stuff can happen. But that's not coming out and going, this is just not. You're not trying to show the person up and going, you can't keep up with me.
Yeah,
like they can't keep up with my questions.